We do have some breaking Jets news. The Jets have, as I mentioned, that comment from Scott Arniel sounded a little ominous last night about Nikolaj Ehlers. Well, we didn't have to wait until Saturday for more from the club. Nikolaj Ehlers has been placed on IR, retroactive to the 18th of October, and Dominic Toninato has been recalled from the Manitoba Moose. Let's get to the latest on the Jets with our good friend and the host of the Skates and Plates podcast. Subscribe wherever you get Winnipeg Sports Talk. It's Brandon Rewucki. Rew, what's up, man? Let's talk about this Nikolaj Ehlers news right now. Obviously not a great situation when he was out for the morning skate and then left and didn't play in the Jets win in Colorado. Considering what happened that day before, I wasn't really expecting him last night. But then when we heard Scott Arniel say that, well, maybe we'll speak about that on Saturday, as I said, it sounded a little bit ominous, and now we've got news that Nikolaj Ehlers is out for the Winnipeg Jets. And we don't know, we haven't heard how long this is going to be. They have not clarified what he's dealing with right now, but it was not related to blocking the shot in the previous game against the Dallas Stars. What do the Winnipeg Jets do? And we've talked a lot about the lack of real depth in those scoring positions and how much was going to be leaned on from Cole Perfetti because of his role in that number 2 line. Listen, I've really liked Mason Appleton in a spot role in the last couple of games. I thought he's acquitted himself well, but man, if Nikolaj Ehlers is gone for any extended period of time, Brandon, I mean, what does that do to where the Winnipeg Jets are right now with their lineup going into the next couple of weeks where they still continue to go head-to-head with some really, really good teams in the NHL?
Yeah, I guess what you do is cry because it's a pretty massive blow, and it sucks too because, I mean, hey, like you said, Appleton's been great on the top line since he went up there. But those first 2 games, you kind of got the sense that there was something special brewing with Ehlers, Connor, and Scheifele playing on the same line, and immediately all that momentum gets halted. It's a pretty devastating blow, and it's also a stark reminder that it's something that should have been addressed 4 months ago, right? It's going to be difficult, and it might be costly to do it right now. It depends on how long he's going to be out for. It doesn't sound like a extremely serious injury, but we've seen in this market before, day to day, all of a sudden turns into 6 to 8 weeks. So I guess we'll just keep our fingers crossed on that. But they were already hoping for big time contributions from guys that had legitimate question marks going into the year. Like Cole Perfetti as a rookie. Can he deliver something along like a 50-ish point pace? Can Blake Wheeler 5-on-5 get somewhere back to the pace that he was a few seasons ago at the very least? And that's, not even to mention the legitimate bottom 6 concerns about can any of these guys score at a good enough clip to pace the top 6 if they go cold on a night. And I think the issue just gets exacerbated here. You do wonder, this was something we talked about 2-3 months ago. There's a log jam on defense. There's an opening up front. Seems to me like this could be something that can solve some of the roster composition issues on this team. We'll see how patient Chevy is going to continue to be here. But I'll tell you what, from how the first 4 games have played out for me, I would not be hesitant whatsoever to pull the trigger on any kind of move to bring in some middle 6 help on this team.
Well, and speaking of that, that's a great way to get in because it's something I wanted to talk to you about. I mean, we've seen some blue lines in this league that are really, really depleted right now. And, if Cheveldayoff was waiting for an opening or an opportunity to get the deal and get the price that he wants for one of his defensemen, I would suggest that time is right now. And listen, it was really unfortunate that Dylan Sandberg wasn't able to go last night because I thought that, he passed his test against the Avalanche with flying colors. We know that Ville Heinola is warming up in, with the Manitoba Moose ready to get in. And we still haven't seen Kyle Capobianco, who they obviously feel can play because he's still with the club right now. But do you agree, Brandon, that sort of the landscape of this early start, some of the struggles of teams, maybe the pressure on certain other GMs, that this next week or so for Cheveldayoff might be a time that makes a lot of sense to pull the trigger on a move?
Yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense. So I guess there's 2 aspects to that for me. First is the one that you touched on there where, and again, we're seeing teams ice 16 guys 17 guy. Like they're not even, it's bizarro where like if somebody mentioned that to you 10 years ago, you'd be like, oh, are the coach and GM like fired the next day? Like how could but now there's like almost a dozen teams that are doing stuff like that now. So I think there's still a level of desperation around the NHL for any kind of defensive impact and help. And the Jets have a few guys that can do that. But the other part of it to me on top of all that is, you saw Sandberg against Colorado, and it's funny. I didn't really notice him all that much, which was kind of refreshing for a Jets blue liner in that it's nice to have somebody that
especially against those guys.
Yeah, right. Like that's not necessarily risk averse, but we're not seeing the back-breaking mistake. We're not seeing the turnover. We're not seeing, how many times does this team fail to exit their zone with the puck on their stick in the defensive end, right? It was nice to have a relatively quiet game from one of their blue liners. But I don't know what you're thinking and what a bunch of the listeners are thinking, but it's been a pretty rocky start for Brendan Dillon. I have concerns if, maybe last year wasn't a mirage and it's not going to work for him in Winnipeg or maybe anywhere else in a top 4 role. And I love Dylan DeMello, but he's had a rocky start to the season too. And I think it's a fair question to ask that if you think Sandberg can give you relatively similar to what Dylan gives you, and you think in a different role, a Heinola can give you something similar to what Dylan DeMello is giving you, doesn't it make all the sense in the world to go with the cheaper option there and then flip that piece to get some help up front where you desperately need it with or without a healthy Nikolaj Ehlers? It makes all the sense in the world to me. And again, we saw last year Sandberg handle the top 4 role pretty well. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't continue on that trajectory this season. And tell you what, again, for a team that hasn't handled breakouts very well so far, and the power play has been a little iffy so far, you've got a breakout power play machine just sitting there in the AHL ready to go if you want to throw him in there. I think it's well past time to give these kids a little bit of a chance, a little bit of a long rope to do so, and it's going to probably have to come at the cost of moving one or two of your veteran defensemen.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is not a new conversation that we've had together or on this program for a good portion of time. And, if there ever was if the thought was waiting till they get the right deal, I guess what I'm suggesting right now is that you look around the National Hockey League with some of the injuries, some of the issues that teams are having, as well as some of the starts that they're having. And maybe this is the time that Chevy can show that the patience was warranted and pull off a nice deal. The one thing I'll say about DeMello, and I'm with you, with Morrissey, there was some ups and downs on that pairing early on. I kind of do think that Dylan DeMello is the absolute perfect guy to have on that third pairing playing with one of those young players. Like, listen, I mean, I know we're high on what Ville Heinola can do in special teams, but I mean, this is not a proven or established player. And I think if you had him playing in a top 4 role, listen, I'm sure there'd be some good things, but I think you'd also see probably the things that worry them about having him play big minutes regularly in the league. But much like we saw Dylan Sandberg, I thought they did a perfect thing. They put him in on that pairing with DeMello, who has been sort of a comfort blanket for his partner historically, and they acquitted themselves quite well. What we didn't expect was Sandberg not to be available.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, it's probably just a bump in the road for DeMello. I mean, his track record's been pretty good in Winnipeg, right? I mean, he's, whether it was with Morrissey or any of the youngsters, his track record says he's going to help elevate the partner that he's with. It's been really, really rocky so far through 4 games. And I didn't think it got any better last night in Vegas, although the whole team was at fault for that. I think Nate Schmidt's been pretty good. I've kind of enjoyed his game. He's maybe taken the whole "our defensemen are coming" mantra to heart, and maybe has, outside of Neil Pionk's goal-scoring heroics, really, really benefited from that shift in an attacking mindset. You do wonder if Dylan is maybe the odd man out in the group there, but he does bring a different element than the rest of the defensemen in this group do, right? I haven't seen it as much as I think I would have liked. But for me, when you look at the cap hit, the intangibles, everything like that, I can understand a team looking at that situation and going, hey, you know what, if we got a pretty deep forward group and it costs us a third liner, why not take a chance on somebody like a Brandon Dillon? It's just going to be, again, what's it going to take? What's it going to take for Chevy to pull the trigger here for me? I'm not waiting for a couple 1-goal offensive outputs in a row to try to get some help up front. Even if Ehlers is coming back after these next 2 games, I'm still looking to make a couple additions because I think this team desperately needs it up front.
Hey, shout out to Kyle in chat. Thanks very much for the super chat, Kyle. He's donating for Remo's Fund to make a sarcasm emoji. That's actually very worthwhile. Kyle, thanks a lot for the support, and thanks to everyone for the super chats. We really do appreciate it. Overall, Brandon, I think we all would have probably taken 2-2, looking at what the team was going into it. I mean, a nice win and a good situation schedule-wise against the Rangers. I think a lot of people thought that if they could have grabbed 2 points out of these last 2 back-to-back games on the road, they certainly would have taken it. Dallas game, the middle of the Dallas game was rough. And I mean, listen, they set the bar on the bottom end with the first period last night. But, despite the fact that that period of time was rough, I mean, we still haven't seen Rick Bowness even on the bench, and the team's 2-2. Should we be pleased with the start, or we're just sort of in the middle right now, still waiting to see what this team can do through 15, 20 games and where they'll be at?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with 2-2. I think that's just fine. I was pretty concerned about the back-to-back against Colorado and Vegas. If you get 2 points against that for the rest of the season, I don't know if there's a lot of teams that are going to be able to pull that off. So no issues with the results that have come so far with Winnipeg. I guess my overall sense of the team through 4 games, there's some things that are more positive than I anticipated and some things that are more negative than I had anticipated. And it's kind of just a break-even point that I still feel like watching the Jets, they need to make an addition or 2 up front and an addition on the back end in terms of back end more quality than quantity. But I still think if this team wants to be a legitimate playoff team, that they need to add and need to do it relatively soon. I don't think they have the horses to compete with some of the upper echelon teams. I think the most positive development so far has been Mark Scheifele's done a complete 180. He's the team's best player right now. I've been beyond impressed with him. And defensively, I think, especially compared to last year, he's been outstanding. And even like that, I think it was the second goal for Vegas last night. Like he's in the right spot. He doesn't finish the play. Obviously, you'd like him to get a stick on somebody in that situation. But tell you what, last year he would have been up at the Rainette line, ready for a pass, right? And now at the very least, you can tell that there's a legitimate, conscientious effort to play behind the puck, to start down low and then move up once the team gets possession and go offensively. I think he's been really, really strong. So that to me has been the biggest positive development so far. I've loved Morrissey's game. And maybe the biggest surprise for me has been Wheeler and Perfetti. I don't know if you see, they've got instant chemistry, right?
Oh, yeah.
They've been really, really strong. And usually Wheeler takes, I've mentioned this in the past. I've got an old rusty lawnmower that I still use, and it works after you give it like 15 pumps, and then it gets the job done. Wheeler in the past has needed about 10 or so games to finally become the Blake Wheeler that makes an impact out there. But he's started off really strong, and I didn't anticipate Dubois being the weak link on that line so far through 4 games. But Wheeler and Perfetti have been really, really strong, and I think there's a lot of reason for optimism on what those two can do on the team's second line together. But to me, there's still a ton of question marks in the bottom 6. I don't know where the offense is going to come from there. And I think there's some big-time concerns on this team's blue line, specifically the veterans more so than the youngsters. And are they going to get above-average defensive play from that unit, or is it going to be, let's lean on Connor Hellebuck to make 35-plus saves and give us a 930 save percentage through the course of the season?
Theo Seegers, thanks for the super chat for Advil for little Nicky. Hopefully not too many Advils will be needed, and hopefully he won't be out too many games, but Theo, appreciate the super chat as well. No, you're exactly right. And I'll say this. I think Appleton in these last couple of games has been more than I certainly expected in that role, playing in filling the huge shoes of Nikolaj Ehlers, figuratively speaking, of course, with Kyle Connor and Scheifele. And Connor, for his part, is sort of averaging about 3 shots a game. He has had some opportunities. He'll still get his looks. I kind of feel like it's going to come for him right now. And listen, he was a big part of the start Mark Scheifele had with the 3 early goals as well. But when you get down, especially with Appleton out or moving up in the lineup with Ehlers out, I think there is a big question as to, you'd love to get some scoring from the bottom 6. But first and foremost, you want to just have it be a push. And listen, the Lowry line has tough matchups, and they continue to be thrown out there. And, I'm not expecting a ton of offense from them, but if they can just stay even against top competition, that's great. The one thing I will say about the fourth line, Brandon, is that, and I'll give Scott Arniel credit for this, he has not been afraid to throw them out in some pretty high leverage situations in games so far, especially, in that game against Colorado, like when the Avalanche were caving the Jets in and scored those goals. And we've all been there before saying, oh my God, this is just going to snowball out of control. There was Gus out there with a strong shift with the fourth line getting it done, and as well playing in the final minute of the game. We hadn't seen that before. And then, of course, we saw Axel make his debut last night, and he nearly scored. Great speed right now. Yeah. I'll say this, I think we need to see more from those lines, especially the fourth line, but I am optimistic with the way that they've acquitted themselves so far in the time that they've played, but also the confidence that the coaching staff seems to be giving them to get out there at times where historically they would have been stapled to the bench.
Yeah. 6 minutes a night would have been the norm a year or two ago, right? Now it's, can we get these guys to play 8, 9, 10 minutes a night? Part of it is you have Mr. Brightside on the fourth line there, and you're not going to hold Sam Gagner back anymore. He's still the offensive dynamo that he was in juniors there. I've kind of enjoyed watching him play. I've always been a fan of how he sees the ice. But yeah, again, it's not even, to me, it's not even necessarily the players' fault. Like, I don't think anybody is underperforming necessarily in the bottom 6. I think they are what they are. Like, they're going to be defensively conscious. They're not going to make back-breaking mistakes or anything like that. But I think there's a limit to the offensive skill that they have, and I think there's a ceiling to the production that they have. And look, it was one thing a few years ago when the Jets' top 6 was legitimately amongst the best in the NHL, where you could say bottom 6 breaks even, top 6 outscores everybody, and we're going to be okay. Like, you could have done that 3 or 4 years ago. Now the top 6, while it's good, is like, where would you rank it? Like, I don't think it's a top 10, top 6 in the NHL anymore. And if that's going to be the case, you need more out of your bottom 6. And I don't think the reinforcements have been added there so far.
Well, here's the thing. You know what? On that, I'll say this. If Nikolaj Ehlers is in the lineup and if he's healthy, and if everyone's there, I think that line, certainly on paper and, so far so good, I think can hang with just about any line in the National Hockey League and, is right up there amongst the best. The question mark was how the second line was going to go. And listen, I've been really impressed with what Wheeler's brought so far, and you've sort of pointed that out. I think Cole Perfetti is getting better and more comfortable each and every game with handling the grind of that role. The guy that's been kind of little up and down so far is Pierre-Luc Dubois. And, Dubois, there was all the baggage with him coming in after the offseason, and, he certainly seemed to put on a brave face. Sometimes, though, he seems to be just doing his own thing. I don't know if you feel that the same way. Some of the penalties that he's taken, some of the, negating a power play 2 seconds in last night, that's just dumb. I don't know any other way to put it. But there still is that edge and that package that Dubois brings that if they can get him kind of playing his best, then I think the Jets' top 6 actually can match up against most, because the big questions were Blake Wheeler and Cole Perfetti, and so far so good, I think, with both of those guys.
Yeah, no, it was funny in the first period against Vegas, there was an instance with Dubois, and it kind of mirrored what I had seen through 3 games. And I wrote down to kind of define Dubois' game. You got to get your head out of your rear end here. And then he goes ahead and scores the next shift. It's like, oh, okay, maybe he did. Maybe we're going to be okay. So it's tough, right? Because it's so early. And so all we have so far are these 4 games, and like, I'm guilty of it too. Like, you want to make sweeping declarations and defining judgments on what this team and what certain players are right now. But I gotta be honest, I'm pretty concerned about Dubois right now, because I think your assessment is spot on, that you're watching him out there, and for large chunks, it's just what are you doing? Like, are you interested? Are you ready to go? Like, I hate to say it, but it's like, are we getting Columbus 2? Are we getting the Shift 2.0? Like, what's going on here? And then you have the penalties, which were a problem last year, right? I mean, I think he led the league in minor penalties and was pretty close, if not over 100 penalty minutes on the season.
He was. He also drew a ton last year.
Yeah.
And no better example of that. I'm still laughing about the coincidental holding minors that Dubois and that guy took in Colorado. Like, I mean, we joked yesterday, like, we'd have to talk to Elias as to when the last time coincidental holding penalties were called on the same guys.
Yeah.
But that was just sort of the give and take of Dubois, because when he's on his game, when he's crushing the net, when he's playing big and strong the way he is, and, having confidence with the puck, he'll draw his fair share of penalties, with the other opponents, but he's also getting the referee to put his arm up as well. And as we know, especially as currently constructed, you cannot be given freebies, especially to teams like the Colorado Avalanche or the Vegas Golden Knights, as the Winnipeg Jets are presently constructed.
Yeah,
even with Connor Hellebuck in net.
And even with Neil Pionk at 4-on-4. But yeah, they'll kill you, right? And that, I mean, the penalty against Vegas is so brain dead that you like it's benching worthy. I really, really dislike that penalty. But like, there's a give and take too, though. Like, I can stomach if Dubois is out there and he gets a roughing penalty in front of the net, or it's a goalie interference in front of the net, or he bashes a guy along the boards and he gets like almost like physical related penalties. Like, I can handle those and maybe trying to get him to turn the intensity down a little bit to a point. But for me, we haven't seen that guy yet this year. And the goal was great, and maybe that kind of kickstarts his game. But if you're going to take penalties, make the opposition pay for them a little bit, as opposed to kicking the skate out 2 seconds into a 5-on-4.